We have given him every opportunity. And we've told him that this aggression would not stand. And now it's too late.
Bush could have said, okay, let us have a ceasefire and then discuss the other matters. He did not accept the ceasefire. He continued the war according to his own schedule. He didn't care about what Gorbachev said and reached with me. He had a schedule.
The coalition was under strain. The French President Francois Mitterrand called, demanding more time for diplomacy. But then Saddam Hussein intervened.
We received word that Saddam had blown the oil wells, and I went rushing up to the Oval Office, and Bush used it right then in the telephone call with Mitterrand, sort of, Francois, we've just received this piece of information that shows that we cannot delay, that Saddam is going to produce a catastrophe in Kuwait. He's already set all the oil wells on fire, and God knows what he may do next. And that pretty well resolved that issue.
Two armies faced each other on the edge of battle.
The coalition will give Saddam Hussein until noon Saturday to do what he must do. Begin his immediate and unconditional withdrawal from Kuwait.
Hundreds of oil wells blazed across Kuwait. Saddam Hussein was destroying what he could not keep. He ignored George Bush's ultimatum. Obeying it would have humiliated him in the eyes of the Arab world.
I have therefore directed General Norman Schwarzkopf to use all forces available to eject the Iraqi army from Kuwait.
Schwarzkopf planned for the U.S. Marines to attack first, straight into Kuwait. He hoped this would convince the elite Republican Guard to move south to counterattack. Then, 400 miles to the west, French and American airborne troops would begin encircling the battlefield. Arab armies would support the attack into Kuwait. 24 hours after the initial assault, the heavy armor of the American and British armies would smash through the Iraqi front line and attack through the lightly defended western desert.
I always thought that there was a reason why they left the West open, and that this would be a place where they would lay down a biological attack, whether it be anthrax or whether it be botulism.
And I had my intelligence staff using terms like chemical killing sack, nuclear detonation area, and this sort of thing to describe possible scenarios as to why that area was left open.
I would wake up in the middle of the night in cold sweat, just thinking about, would they use them? Would they use them in the area out west where there was not a lot of troops, and we thought there must be a reason for that.
Schwarzkopf's plan meant Walt Boomer, the commander of the U.S. Marines, would be the first to lead his men into action. Despite the air war, Boomer feared storming the minefields and barbed wire of southern Kuwait would be a murderous affair, fought under a barrage of Iraqi chemicals and nerve gas.
We were outnumbered when we attacked into Kuwait. Sometimes people have lost sight of that. But in addition to being outnumbered, there was this overriding concern, overwhelming concern about chemical warfare. This just occupied most of my waking moments.
Beneath smoke from the burning oil wells, the assault units pulled on the clumsy charcoal-lined suits that might save their lives in a chemical bombardment. Marine engineers began to crawl through the miles of minefields, bunker complexes, and barbed wire that protected the Iraqi front line. As they advanced, they used fiberglass rods to probe for mines so they could mark out safe paths for the first troops to race through.
You see mines everywhere. You can look left and right, and you see mines, half-buried mines, full-view mines. Just as far as you can see, you look left and right, and there's desert, and there's just lines and lines and lines, and groups of mines built there. We crawled, low crawled, which is on your belly, probing along with the fiberglass rods. 70 meters in front of you, Iraqis. Marine snipers are behind us trying to suppress Iraqis that are moving through the trench lines. You hear artillery, mortars, small arms.
Constantly under fire, Restifo carved paths through 2 minefields blocking the main attack. Meanwhile, 17,000 Marines headed for the beaches of Kuwait City. 2 weeks before, a landing had been on the cards. But the defenses were so strong, the Marines would have been cut to pieces. Now, Schwarzkopf wanted to convince the Iraqis an amphibious assault was imminent. To reinforce the deception, Lieutenant Tom Dietz was ordered to plant bombs on a beach close to the city, so its defenders would think a landing zone was being cleared. The 16-inch guns of the battleship Missouri shelled the beaches to complete the deception. The Missouri had fought in World War II. Many of its shells were made in the 30s. Within months, the last battleships would be decommissioned and the shells sent to museums. But the bombardment achieved its purpose. Iraqi troops moved to the coast and away from the point where the Marines would attack.
First Marine Division will cross west of the El Wafra in zone at approximately 01200 at H hour.
In the desert, the Marine commanders rehearsed their plans for the last time. They expected a tough fight.
While I remain apprehensive about some of their capability, I'm also confident that we can work through that. I think we can work through their chemical capability.
The attack began.
I don't think anyone predicted that the Marines would get much farther than maybe 5 kilometers. At the very most, maybe 8. And that then, with the enormous, overwhelming forces that were arrayed in that area, that it would stop the Marines.
We're going through the breach.
But by dawn, the generals realized something remarkable had happened. The Marine columns were driving through the enemy positions, serenaded by loudspeakers playing the Marine hymn.
Iraqi fighting positions.
While Allied aircraft watched for a counterattack, thousands of Marines poured into Kuwait, almost unopposed.
We expected casualties somewhere in the 25 to 30% range. But there was essentially no firefights, essentially no battles. The Iraqis were there, but they elected not to fight. In many respects, they could retreat and they could surrender much faster than we could attack or advance. And that the war really became a war of collection of enemy prisoners of war.
6 weeks of relentless attack from Allied aircraft had convinced the Iraqi conscripts in the front line their cause was hopeless. Half had deserted by the time the attack came. Those that stayed, shell-shocked, often in tears, were waiting their chance to surrender.